On the morning of September 23, 1968, 23 workers clocked in for their shift at the Mahoning Valley Steel Works in Youngstown, Ohio. By 10:47 a.m., 7 of them would be dead, overcome by a massive hydrogen sulfide gas leak that turned a routine maintenance operation into one of the deadliest industrial accidents in Ohio's history. 7 families would receive devastating phone calls that afternoon. 7 empty chairs would sit at dinner tables that evening, all because a corroded valve failed during what should have been a simple pipe cleaning procedure, releasing lethal concentrations of gas that killed within minutes. If you want to understand how this preventable tragedy claimed 7 lives and changed industrial safety standards forever, subscribe to this channel for more investigations into fatal accidents that shaped workplace safety. This episode is a fictionalized reconstruction inspired by real chemical industry accidents and industrial safety investigations. Names, locations, and specific events have been created for storytelling purposes. The Mahoning Valley Steel Works sprawls across 200 acres of industrial landscape in northeastern Ohio, its massive furnaces and towering smokestacks dominating the skyline like monuments to American industrial might. In September 1968, the facility operates at near capacity, feeding the insatiable demand for steel that powers the nation's infrastructure boom. The morning air carries the acrid smell of coal smoke mixed with the metallic tang of hot steel, while the constant rumble of machinery creates a mechanical symphony that never sleeps. The weather on September 23 presents perfect conditions for industrial work. Clear skies stretch endlessly overhead, with temperatures holding steady at 68 degrees and virtually no wind to complicate outdoor operations. The barometric pressure sits at a stable 30.15 inches, creating atmospheric conditions that will later prove crucial to understanding how toxic gases behave during the fatal incident. Morning dew still clings to the railings and walkways throughout the complex, but the rising sun promises to burn it off within hours. This particular section of the steel works houses the coking plant, where coal transforms into coke through an intricate process of heating and chemical treatment. The facility processes approximately 15,000 tons of coal weekly, converting it into the high-carbon fuel essential for steel production. Massive ovens stretch in orderly rows, each one reaching temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The byproducts of this process include numerous gases, some valuable for industrial use, others requiring careful handling due to their toxic properties. The economic pressures driving the facility are immense. Steel demand has surged throughout the decade, fueled by interstate highway construction, urban development, and the ongoing space program. The Mahoning Valley Works operates 3 shifts daily, employing over 800 workers across various departments. Production targets have increased by 30% over the past 2 years, creating constant pressure to maximize efficiency while maintaining the complex systems that keep the facility running safely. The coking operation generates several dangerous gases as natural byproducts, including hydrogen sulfide, carbon monoxide, and various sulfur compounds. These gases require sophisticated collection and processing systems to prevent environmental contamination and worker exposure. The gas collection network consists of hundreds of pipes, valves, and processing units that capture, separate, and either utilize or safely dispose of these byproducts. Regular maintenance of this system proves essential, as any failure can result in dangerous gas releases. The Mahoning Valley Steel Works has operated since 1902, growing from a modest foundry into one of the region's largest steel production facilities. The company's safety record reflects the era's industrial standards, with workplace injuries considered an unfortunate but inevitable aspect of heavy manufacturing. The facility has experienced its share of accidents over the decades, including several fatalities from equipment failures, falls, and exposure to hazardous materials. In 1963, a furnace explosion killed 2 workers and injured 7 others when a gas line ruptured during routine maintenance. The incident led to modest improvements in safety procedures, but the fundamental approach to hazardous gas handling remained largely unchanged. 3 years later, a crane collapse resulted in 1 death and multiple injuries, prompting additional safety training but no major systemic changes to maintenance protocols. The facility's most recent safety inspection, conducted by state officials in June 1968, identified several areas of concern regarding gas handling procedures. Inspectors noted that many valves in the gas collection system showed signs of corrosion and recommended immediate replacement of components over 10 years old. However, budget constraints and production pressures delayed implementation of these recommendations. The inspection report specifically highlighted the need for improved gas monitoring equipment and better emergency response procedures for toxic gas releases. Federal workplace safety regulations in 1968 remain relatively limited compared to later standards. The Occupational Safety and Health Act will not become law for another 2 years, leaving much of industrial safety oversight to state agencies with limited resources and enforcement authority. Many facilities, including Mahoning Valley, rely primarily on company policies and worker experience rather than comprehensive safety management systems. The facility's gas handling training consists mainly of on-the-job instruction from experienced workers, with minimal formal education about the specific hazards of hydrogen sulfide and other toxic gases. Most workers understand that certain areas can be dangerous, but few receive detailed information about gas concentrations, exposure limits, or proper emergency procedures. The prevailing attitude treats gas exposure as an occupational hazard to be endured rather than a preventable risk requiring systematic management. Maintenance schedules at the facility operate on a reactive basis, with repairs conducted primarily when equipment fails rather than through preventive programs. This approach, common throughout heavy industry during the era, prioritizes production continuity over proactive maintenance. The gas collection system, despite its critical safety function, receives the same reactive maintenance approach as other facility systems. The workers who will lose their lives on September 23 represent a cross-section of the facility's experienced personnel. Maintenance Supervisor Robert Chun, 42 years old, brings 15 years of experience to his role overseeing gas system repairs. Chun earned promotion to supervisor 3 years earlier based on his technical knowledge and reliability. He lives in nearby Boardman with his wife and 2 teenage children, coaching Little League Baseball in his spare time and planning to retire from the steel works in another 15 years. Pipe fitter Thomas Martinez, 36, has worked at the facility for 8 years, specializing in gas line maintenance and repair. Known for his meticulous attention to detail, Martinez often volunteers for the more challenging jobs involving complex pipe configurations. He recently purchased a small house in Austintown and was saving money to start his own contracting business after gaining more experience with industrial systems. Equipment operator James Wilson, 29, operates the heavy machinery used in maintenance operations. Wilson joined the facility straight from military service, where he learned equipment operation skills that translated well to industrial work. His colleagues respect his calm demeanor and problem-solving abilities, particularly during complex repair operations. Welder Frank Rodriguez, 38, handles specialized welding tasks throughout the facility. Rodriguez's expertise with high-pressure gas lines makes him essential for many maintenance operations. He supports an extended family and works occasional overtime shifts to help pay for his daughter's college education. Maintenance worker Carl Johnson, 25, represents the facility's younger generation of workers. Johnson shows promise as a future supervisor and often works closely with Chun to learn advanced maintenance techniques. He recently married and was planning to start a family. Utility worker Michael Davis, 41, handles various support tasks during maintenance operations. Davis's reliability and willingness to work in difficult conditions make him a valuable team member for challenging repair jobs. Safety observer Paul Anderson, 34, was assigned to monitor the gas line maintenance operation. Anderson's role involves ensuring proper procedures and identifying potential hazards during the work. He has 3 years of experience in safety monitoring and was considered one of the facility's more conscientious safety personnel. The morning of September 23rd begins routinely, with the facility operating at normal production levels. The coking ovens maintain their standard temperatures, and gas collection systems function within expected parameters. Weather conditions remain ideal for outdoor maintenance work, with clear visibility and minimal wind to complicate gas handling operations. At 6:30 a.m., the maintenance crew gathers for their daily briefing in the small office adjacent to the coking plant. Chen reviews the day's primary task, cleaning and inspecting a major gas collection line that has shown reduced flow rates over the past week. The line, installed in 1954, carries hydrogen sulfide and other gases from the coking ovens to the processing facility. Recent pressure readings suggest possible blockages or corrosion that require investigation. The gas line in question measures 36 inches in diameter and stretches approximately 400 feet between the oven battery and the gas processing plant. The line operates under moderate pressure, typically maintaining around 15 pounds per square inch during normal operations. However, the gases flowing through the line include hydrogen sulfide concentrations that can prove lethal at relatively low atmospheric levels. Chen assigns specific roles for the maintenance operation. Martinez will handle the pipe fitting work, including valve operations and line isolation procedures. Wilson will operate the equipment needed for cleaning and inspection. Rodriguez stands ready to perform any welding repairs identified during the inspection. Johnson, Davis, and Anderson will provide general support and safety monitoring throughout the operation. The crew's plan involves isolating a section of the gas line, purging it with nitrogen to remove hazardous gases, then opening access points for cleaning and inspection. This type of operation has been performed dozens of times over the years, though always with awareness of the potential dangers involved. The procedure requires careful coordination to ensure proper isolation and purging before workers enter areas where gas exposure might occur. At 7:15 a.m., the crew begins preliminary preparations. Martinez checks the valve lineup that will isolate the target section of pipe, while Wilson positions the nitrogen purging equipment. The isolation procedure requires closing multiple valves in a specific sequence to prevent gas from entering the work area from either direction. This process typically takes 30 to 45 minutes to complete properly. The nitrogen purging system, designed to displace hazardous gases with inert nitrogen, consists of portable equipment connected to the isolated pipe section through temporary fittings. The purging process normally requires several hours to achieve safe gas levels, with periodic testing to verify that hazardous gas concentrations have dropped to acceptable levels. However, the facility's gas testing equipment consists of basic detection tubes that provide only rough estimates of gas concentrations. During the isolation procedure, Martinez notices that one of the key isolation valves shows signs of external corrosion around the stem packing. The valve, installed in 1956, has operated for 12 years without major maintenance. Despite the visible corrosion, the valve appears to close properly and hold pressure during initial testing. Martinez notes the condition in the work log, but determines that the valve can safely perform its isolation function for the current operation. The morning progresses smoothly as the crew methodically works through their preparation checklist. By 9:30 a.m., they believe the line section has been properly isolated and purging with nitrogen has begun. Gas testing using detection tubes indicates that hydrogen sulfide levels in the isolated section have dropped significantly, though the crude testing method cannot provide precise measurements of remaining gas concentrations. At 10:15 a.m., Chen authorizes the crew to begin opening access points on the isolated line section. This critical phase of the operation exposes workers to any gases that might remain in the supposedly purged pipe section. The crew approaches this phase with appropriate caution, but their confidence in the isolation and purging procedures leads them to work in close proximity to the access points. The first indication of trouble comes at 10:43 a.m. when Martinez, working near the main access point, suddenly staggers backward and calls out that he smells gas. The distinctive rotten egg odor of hydrogen sulfide becomes immediately apparent to other crew members in the vicinity. Within seconds, the smell intensifies dramatically, indicating a significant gas release rather than minor residual vapors. The corroded valve that Martinez noted earlier has begun to fail catastrophically. The combination of internal gas pressure and external corrosion causes the valve stem packing to rupture, allowing high-concentration hydrogen sulfide to bypass the isolation and flow directly into the supposedly safe work area. The gas emerges not as a gentle leak, but as a pressurized stream that quickly disperses throughout the immediate vicinity. Hydrogen sulfide at high concentrations attacks the human nervous system with devastating speed. At levels above 500 parts per million, The gas causes immediate unconsciousness and respiratory paralysis. The concentrations now flooding the work area exceed 1,000 parts per million, creating conditions that prove fatal within minutes. The gas also has the cruel characteristic of paralyzing the sense of smell at high concentrations, preventing victims from detecting the continuing danger. Martinez, positioned closest to the failed valve, receives the highest initial exposure and collapses within 30 seconds. Rodriguez, working approximately 10 feet away, attempts to reach Martinez but is overcome before he can provide assistance. The gas cloud expands rapidly in the still morning air, engulfing Johnson and Davis, who were positioning equipment nearby. Wilson, operating machinery about 20 feet from the gas source, notices his colleagues collapsing and attempts to sound an alarm. However, the expanding gas cloud reaches him before he can escape the area. The hydrogen sulfide concentrations prove too high for survival, and Wilson loses consciousness while trying to reach the emergency communication system. Anderson, fulfilling his safety observer role from a position slightly upwind of the main work area, initially avoids the worst of the gas exposure. He manages to activate a manual alarm and begins moving toward the affected workers. However, shifting air currents carry the gas cloud in his direction, and the lethal concentrations overcome him before he can reach safety or provide assistance to his colleagues. Chun, who was coordinating the operation from a control point about 50 feet away, hears the alarm and sees workers collapsing in the gas-affected area. He immediately recognizes the severity of the situation and calls for emergency response while attempting to approach the affected area. However, the gas concentrations extend further than initially apparent, and Chun is overcome approximately 30 feet from the main gas release point. The entire incident unfolds in less than 4 minutes. By 10:47 a.m., all 7 workers lie unconscious in the gas-affected area, with hydrogen sulfide concentrations remaining at lethal levels. The failed valve continues to release gas, creating an expanding danger zone that prevents immediate rescue attempts. Other facility personnel, alerted by Anderson's alarm activation, recognize the gas hazard and maintain safe distances while calling for emergency response. The facility's emergency response procedures activate immediately upon recognition of the gas release. Plant security contacts local fire and rescue services, while facility personnel work to shut off gas flow to the affected area. However, the valve failure that caused the incident also complicates efforts to stop the gas release, as the primary isolation point has become the source of the leak. Maintenance personnel working in other areas of the facility quickly identify alternative isolation points that can stop gas flow to the failed valve. This process requires approximately 15 minutes, during which time the gas continues to release into the atmosphere. The delay, though unavoidable given the system configuration, ensures that the affected area remains dangerous for an extended period. Local fire department personnel arrive at 10:58 a.m., equipped with breathing apparatus that allows them to enter the gas-affected area. However, their initial assessment reveals that the 7 workers have been exposed to lethal gas concentrations for too long to survive. Emergency medical personnel, arriving shortly afterward, confirm that all 7 workers have succumbed to hydrogen sulfide poisoning. The recovery of the victims requires careful coordination to ensure that additional personnel do not become casualties. Fire department personnel, working in teams with full breathing protection, systematically remove each worker from the gas-affected area. The process takes over an hour to complete safely, with continuous monitoring of gas concentrations to prevent further exposure incidents. Emergency medical personnel establish a triage area outside the danger zone, but their examination of the victims confirms the worst fears. All 7 workers are pronounced dead at the scene, having succumbed to acute hydrogen sulfide poisoning. The rapid onset of symptoms and high gas concentrations made survival impossible once the workers were overcome by the initial exposure. The immediate aftermath of the tragedy transforms the facility into a scene of controlled chaos. Emergency responders work to secure the area and prevent additional casualties, while company officials begin the grim process of notifying families and coordinating with authorities. The gas leak is finally controlled by 11:30 a.m., but the damage has been done. News of the 7 deaths spreads quickly through the local community. The Mahoning Valley Steel Works has been a cornerstone of local employment for decades, and many residents have friends or family members working at the facility. The magnitude of the tragedy, with 7 workers dying in a single incident, shocks the community and raises immediate questions about industrial safety practices. Company officials faced the difficult task of explaining how a routine maintenance operation resulted in 7 fatalities. Initial statements emphasized that the incident resulted from an unexpected equipment failure rather than procedural violations. However, questions immediately arise about the adequacy of safety procedures, equipment maintenance, and gas monitoring capabilities. The 7 victims represent a devastating loss to their families and the broader community. Robert Chun leaves behind a wife and 2 children who now face an uncertain future without their primary breadwinner. Thomas Martinez's wife must cope with the loss of her husband and the end of their dreams for starting their own business. The other families face similar tragedies, with sudden loss compounded by financial uncertainty. State and federal investigators arrive at the facility within hours of the incident. The magnitude of the tragedy, with 7 workers dying from gas exposure, demands a comprehensive investigation into the causes and contributing factors. The investigation team includes specialists in industrial safety, gas handling procedures, and equipment failure analysis. The investigation begins with a detailed examination of the failed valve and the gas handling system. Investigators quickly identify the corroded valve stem packing as the immediate cause of the gas release. However, they also investigate why the valve was allowed to remain in service despite visible corrosion and why backup safety systems failed to prevent the tragedy. Examination of maintenance records reveals that the failed valve had not received comprehensive maintenance since its installation in 1956. While external inspections noted corrosion, no detailed assessment of the valve's internal condition had been conducted. The valve's failure represents the culmination of 12 years of gradual deterioration that went unaddressed due to reactive rather than preventive maintenance practices. The investigation also focuses on the gas detection and monitoring procedures used during the maintenance operation. The basic detection tubes employed by the facility prove inadequate for accurately measuring hydrogen sulfide concentrations, particularly at the levels that proved lethal. More sophisticated monitoring equipment might have provided earlier warning of dangerous gas levels. Investigators examine the nitrogen purging procedures used to displace hazardous gases from the isolated pipe section. While the procedures followed established industry practices, the investigation reveals that the purging process was incomplete due to the compromised isolation provided by the corroded valve. Gas continued to enter the supposedly safe work area throughout the purging process, but at levels too low to detect with the available monitoring equipment. The emergency response procedures received scrutiny as well. While facility personnel responded appropriately once the gas release was recognized, the investigation examines whether earlier detection might have prevented some or all of the fatalities. The rapid onset of hydrogen sulfide poisoning means that even seconds of additional warning time could have saved lives. Expert testimony during the investigation emphasizes the unique dangers of hydrogen sulfide compared to other industrial gases. Unlike carbon monoxide, which causes gradual incapacitation, hydrogen sulfide at high concentrations causes immediate collapse and death. This characteristic makes proper isolation and monitoring procedures absolutely critical for any work involving hydrogen sulfide systems. The investigation team reconstructs the timeline of events leading to the 7 deaths. Their analysis reveals that the valve failure occurred gradually over several minutes, initially releasing small amounts of gas that went undetected. The failure then accelerated rapidly, creating the lethal concentrations that killed the workers before they could escape or receive assistance. Medical examination of the victims confirms that all 7 died from acute hydrogen sulfide poisoning. The high gas concentrations caused immediate respiratory paralysis and cardiac arrest, with death occurring within 2 to 3 minutes of initial exposure. The rapid progression of symptoms explains why none of the workers were able to escape the affected area or assist their colleagues. The investigation's findings reveal multiple contributing factors that combined to create the fatal incident. The primary cause was the failure of the corroded valve, but contributing factors included inadequate maintenance procedures, insufficient gas monitoring equipment, and incomplete understanding of hydrogen sulfide hazards among the work crew. Legal proceedings following the investigation include both criminal and civil components. The district attorney's office examines whether criminal negligence charges are appropriate, while the victims' families file wrongful death lawsuits against the company. The legal proceedings focus on whether the company's safety practices met reasonable standards and whether the deaths could have been prevented through different procedures. The wrongful death lawsuits result in substantial settlements for the 7 families, though no amount of money can compensate for their losses. The settlements include provisions for ongoing support for the victims' children and spouses, recognizing the long-term financial impact of losing primary breadwinners. Criminal charges are ultimately not filed, as prosecutors determined that while the company's safety practices were inadequate, they did not rise to the level of criminal negligence under existing laws. However, the investigation results in significant regulatory action and industry-wide changes to prevent similar tragedies. The Ohio Department of Commerce implements new regulations specifically addressing hydrogen sulfide hazards in industrial facilities. These regulations require comprehensive gas monitoring equipment, detailed valve maintenance programs, and specialized training for workers handling hydrogen sulfide systems. The regulations also mandate emergency response procedures specifically designed for rapid-onset gas exposure incidents. The tragedy prompts the steel industry to re-evaluate gas handling safety practices nationwide. Industry associations develop new standards for valve maintenance, gas monitoring, and worker protection during maintenance operations. These standards emphasize preventive maintenance over reactive repairs and require sophisticated monitoring equipment for all work involving toxic gases. The incident contributes to growing momentum for federal workplace safety legislation. The 7 deaths at Mahoning Valley Steel Works become part of the evidence supporting the need for comprehensive occupational safety standards. When the Occupational Safety and Health Act becomes law in 1970, hydrogen sulfide exposure limits and monitoring requirements are among the initial standards adopted. The facility itself undergoes major changes following the tragedy. The company invests heavily in new gas monitoring equipment, valve replacement programs, and worker training. The gas handling procedures are completely revised to incorporate lessons learned from the fatal incident. The facility also establishes a safety committee with worker representation to provide ongoing oversight of hazardous operations. A memorial to the 7 workers is established at the facility, recognizing their contributions to the steel industry and serving as a reminder of the importance of safety vigilance. The memorial includes the names of Robert Chun, Thomas Martinez, James Wilson, Frank Rodriguez, Carl Johnson, Michael Davis, and Paul Anderson, ensuring that their sacrifice is not forgotten. The families of the victims work to establish scholarship funds in their loved ones' names, providing educational opportunities for other working-class families in the community. These scholarships help ensure that the victim's legacy includes positive contributions to future generations, even as their own dreams and aspirations were cut short by preventable tragedy. The long-term impact of the Mahoning Valley Steel Works tragedy extends far beyond the immediate changes at the facility. The incident becomes a case study used in industrial safety training programs, helping future generations of workers understand the critical importance of proper gas handling procedures. The technical details of the valve failure and the progression of the fatal gas release provide valuable lessons for engineers and safety professionals. Current industrial facilities handling hydrogen sulfide operate under comprehensive safety management systems that trace their origins, in part, to lessons learned from tragedies like the one at Mahoning Valley. Modern gas detection systems can provide real-time monitoring with immediate alarms for dangerous concentrations. Valve maintenance programs now emphasize predictive maintenance using advanced inspection techniques to identify potential failures before they occur. The incident also highlights the importance of understanding human factors in industrial safety. The 7 workers who died were experienced professionals who understood their jobs and followed established procedures. Their deaths resulted not from carelessness or incompetence, but from systematic failures in equipment maintenance and hazard recognition that created conditions where experience and caution could not prevent tragedy. The story of September 23, 1968, serves as a powerful reminder that industrial safety requires constant vigilance and systematic approaches to hazard management. The 7 workers who lost their lives that morning went to work expecting to return home to their families at the end of their shift. Their deaths demonstrate how quickly routine operations can become deadly when safety systems fail and highlight the human cost of inadequate attention to workplace hazards. The tragedy at Mahoning Valley Steelworks teaches us that safety cannot be left to chance or treated as a secondary consideration in industrial operations. The deaths of Robert Chun, Thomas Martinez, James Wilson, Frank Rodriguez, Carl Johnson, Michael Davis, and Paul Anderson remind us that behind every safety regulation and procedure are real people whose lives depend on getting the details right. Their legacy lives on in the improved safety standards that help protect today's industrial workers, ensuring that their sacrifice contributes to preventing future tragedies and saving other lives. If this story about preventable tragedy and lost lives gave you insight into why safety vigilance matters in industrial operations, leave your like and share with others who appreciate learning from fatal accidents so others might live. The technical investigation into the valve failure reveals disturbing details about the systematic maintenance failures that led to 7 deaths. Metallurgical analysis of the failed valve components shows that corrosion had progressed far beyond what external visual inspection could detect. The valve's internal surfaces had deteriorated to less than 40% of their original thickness, creating stress concentrations that made catastrophic failure inevitable under normal operating pressures. Engineers examining the failed valve discover that the corrosion pattern indicates exposure to hydrogen sulfide over many years without adequate protective measures. The valve material, standard carbon steel appropriate for many applications, proves inadequate for long-term hydrogen sulfide service. More resistant materials were available in 1956 when the valve was installed, but cost considerations led to the selection of less expensive standard materials that could not withstand the corrosive environment. The investigation expands to examine similar valves throughout the facility's gas handling system. This comprehensive assessment reveals that dozens of other valves show similar corrosion patterns, with many approaching the same critical condition as the one that failed. The systematic nature of the problem indicates that the 7 deaths at Mahoning Valley represent not an isolated equipment failure, but the first manifestation of a facility-wide maintenance crisis that could have resulted in additional tragedies. Investigators discover that the facility's maintenance budget had been reduced by 30% over the previous 3 years as part of cost-cutting measures designed to improve profitability. These reductions primarily affected preventive maintenance programs, with the company shifting to a strategy of repairing equipment only after failures occurred. The approach saved money in the short term, but created the conditions that would ultimately claim 7 lives. The investigation team interviews surviving workers and supervisors to understand the safety culture that existed before the tragedy. These interviews reveal a pattern of normalizing dangerous conditions, with workers becoming accustomed to gas odors and minor leaks that should have triggered immediate maintenance action. The gradual deterioration of safety standards created an environment where warning signs were ignored or rationalized away. Former facility safety manager William Thompson, who had left the company 6 months before the fatal accident, provides crucial testimony about his unsuccessful efforts to secure funding for comprehensive valve replacement programs. Thompson's internal memos, obtained during the investigation, document his repeated warnings about hydrogen sulfide system hazards and his frustration with management's unwillingness to invest in preventive maintenance. His departure from the company followed disagreements over safety priorities versus production goals. The investigation also examines the adequacy of worker training regarding hydrogen sulfide hazards. While workers received general safety orientation, few had detailed knowledge of hydrogen sulfide's unique characteristics, including its ability to cause immediate unconsciousness at high concentrations. This knowledge gap meant that workers could not properly assess risks or take appropriate protective measures when gas releases occurred. Expert witness Dr. Margaret Foster, a toxicologist specializing in industrial gas exposures, testifies about the specific physiological effects that killed the 7 workers. Her analysis explains that hydrogen sulfide at concentrations above 1,000 parts per million causes what she terms knockdown effects, where victims lose consciousness so rapidly that they cannot take self-protective actions. This characteristic makes proper engineering controls and gas detection systems absolutely critical for worker survival. The investigation reveals that more sophisticated gas detection equipment was available in 1968, but was not considered necessary by facility management. Continuous monitoring systems that could provide real-time gas concentration readings and automatic alarms cost approximately $50,000 for the entire facility. This amount, equivalent to less than 2 days of facility revenue, could have provided the early warning that might have saved 7 lives. Federal investigators examine whether existing regulations provided adequate guidance for hydrogen sulfide safety. Their analysis reveals significant gaps in regulatory coverage, with most industrial safety standards focusing on more common hazards like falls and equipment injuries. The specific requirements for toxic gas handling were minimal and largely left to individual company discretion. The tragedy prompts a comprehensive review of similar facilities nationwide. This review identifies over 200 steel and chemical plants using similar gas handling systems with comparable maintenance practices. The potential for additional tragedies becomes clear as investigators realize that the conditions at Mahoning Valley exist throughout American heavy industry. Industry response to the 7 deaths includes the formation of a steel industry safety consortium dedicated to developing comprehensive hydrogen sulfide safety standards. This consortium, comprising major steel producers and safety experts, creates detailed guidelines for valve maintenance, gas monitoring, and emergency response procedures. These voluntary standards exceed existing regulatory requirements and become the foundation for future mandatory regulations. The legal proceedings extend beyond wrongful death settlements to include broader questions of corporate responsibility for worker safety. Legal scholars examine whether existing laws adequately address situations where companies choose profit margins over worker protection. The Mahoning Valley case becomes a landmark in establishing corporate liability for systematic safety failures that result in worker deaths. The families of the 7 victims become advocates for stronger workplace safety laws, testifying before Congress about the need for comprehensive federal safety standards. Their emotional testimony, describing the impact of losing breadwinners to preventable industrial accidents, helps build political support for what will become the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970. The memorial established for the 7 workers evolved into a broader safety education center that provides training for industrial workers throughout the region. The center offers specialized courses in hydrogen sulfide safety, valve maintenance, and emergency response procedures. Thousands of workers receive training at the center over the following decades, with many crediting the program with preventing accidents at their own facilities. Research conducted in response to the tragedy leads to significant advances in gas detection technology. Companies develop portable monitors capable of detecting hydrogen sulfide at much lower concentrations than previously possible. These devices become standard equipment for maintenance operations involving toxic gases, providing the real-time monitoring capability that could have prevented the 7 deaths. The incident also spurs development of improved emergency response procedures specifically designed for rapid-onset gas exposure situations. These procedures emphasize immediate area evacuation and professional rescue response rather than attempting worker-to-worker rescue that could create additional casualties. Fire departments nationwide adopt these protocols, potentially saving lives in future industrial gas incidents. The transformation of safety culture at Mahoning Valley Steelworks serves as a model for other industrial facilities. The company implements a comprehensive safety management system that includes worker participation in hazard identification, regular safety audits by external experts, and financial incentives tied to safety performance rather than production metrics alone. These changes demonstrate that profitable operations and worker safety can coexist when properly managed. The economic impact of the safety improvements extends beyond the immediate costs of equipment and training. Insurance companies begin offering reduced premiums for facilities that implement comprehensive safety management systems, recognizing that preventing accidents saves money for everyone involved. This economic incentive helps accelerate adoption of improved safety practices throughout heavy industry. Educational institutions incorporate the Mahoning Valley tragedy into their engineering and safety curricula, ensuring that future generations of professionals understand the human cost of inadequate safety practices. Case studies based on the incident help students understand how technical failures, economic pressures, and organizational culture combine to create conditions for workplace tragedies. The 7 deaths also influence international safety standards, as other countries examine their own industrial safety practices in light of the American tragedy. The incident becomes part of international discussions about workplace safety, contributing to global improvements in industrial gas handling procedures and worker protection standards. 20 years after the tragedy, a comprehensive study examines the long-term effectiveness of changes implemented following the 7 deaths. The study finds that similar hydrogen sulfide accidents have virtually disappeared from American industry, with improved maintenance practices, gas detection systems, and worker training preventing dozens of potential tragedies. The study estimates that the safety improvements prompted by the Mahoning Valley incident have saved over 100 lives in subsequent decades. The children of the 7 victims, now adults with careers of their own, continue to honor their father's memory through ongoing safety advocacy. Several have pursued careers in industrial safety or engineering, motivated by their personal understanding of the consequences when safety systems fail. Their professional contributions extend their father's legacy beyond the immediate tragedy to encompass ongoing efforts to protect other workers. The facility itself eventually closes in the 1980s as the American steel industry undergoes major restructuring. However, the safety practices developed in response to the 1968 tragedy influence operations at other facilities operated by the same company. The lessons learned from 7 preventable deaths continue to protect workers long after the specific facility where they died ceases operations. Modern industrial safety professionals study the Mahoning Valley incident as an example of how multiple system failures can combine to create catastrophic outcomes. The accident demonstrates that preventing workplace fatalities requires attention to equipment maintenance, worker training, hazard recognition, emergency response, and organizational safety culture. Weakness in any single area can prove fatal when other protective systems also fail. The story of Robert Chun, Thomas Martinez, James Wilson, Frank Rodriguez, Carl Johnson, Michael Davis, and Paul Anderson reminds us that workplace safety improvements often come at the cost of preventable tragedies that destroy families and communities. Their deaths on September 23, 1968, represent both a devastating loss and a catalyst for changes that have protected countless other workers from similar fates. The ongoing challenge for industry and regulators is to continue improving safety practices before additional tragedies occur, rather than waiting for preventable deaths to drive necessary changes.